The PlayStation 3 was a huge step for the PlayStation brand. It ushered in an HD era that would forever change how games look, and online capabilities were now an integral part of the system itself. Users could not only play games online, but message friends, purchase movies and television shows, buy, expand, and try out digital games. There was a point when Sony and third-party studios made it a big deal to come out with digital-only experiences. These were smaller experiences at a fraction of the price. Some were puzzle games, but others had their own unique flair. There was simply something for everyone, and none were more groundbreaking, beautiful, unique, or as talked about as the trilogy of games by Thatgamecompany. Life could be simple, and it's this tagline that perfectly describes Flow. It's the start of the artistic, simplistic, and emotional experiences Thatgamecompany would develop. Unlike most games at the time, there is no set goal for the player, and it's up to them to jump in and explore what there is to see, and it's a very simple concept. Eat things to evolve and dive deeper down into the abyss. Think of Flow as EA Spore before Spore even came out, but you never get past that very first stage. Things start out simple. There are harmless organisms you can choose to eat, but the deeper down you explore into this almost endless abyss, the more hostile creatures become. Not only are you trying to advance or evolve, but these creatures will target you, and if they cause enough damage, you will be sent to the plane above you. Eventually, there is an ending point which unlocks new playable creatures, so you can play the experience once again. Each playable creature has a special ability. Some can move faster to dodge or kill enemies, while some can stun rivals with poison. It all varies per creature. So the game uses the PlayStation 3's 6-axis controller functionality, and unlike a lot of other games during that time that were forced to use these controls, it actually works pretty well. But it would have been nice to have the option between these motion controls and a standard way of playing. Flow may be more known as a PlayStation title, but Flow actually started off as an online browser game. The game was designed as an independent game by Genova Chen and Nicholas Clark, and released as a free Flash game in 2006 as part of Chen's master thesis when he attended the University of Southern California. Chen wanted to illustrate dynamic difficulty adjustment, which means that the game adjusts its reactions to the player based on player action of past and present, meaning players can make the game difficult or easy for themselves depending if they eat to evolve. The two would teach themselves Flash programming and take 2 months of development before it was released online. It would receive 100,000 downloads in its first 2 weeks of release, and by 2008 it was played over 3.5 million times. Soon after Chen's graduation, Thatgamecompany was established, and Sony was so impressed with Flow, they provided Thatgamecompany with finances, supplies, and additional staff, along with a 3-game contract that would begin with Flow. With the PlayStation 3 set for launch in November 2006, Sony was in desperate need of games for users to purchase on their PlayStation Network, and an updated version of Flow was set to coincide on its launch, but development pushed the game to February 2007 and didn't include half of the original design as planned. Despite this, Flow would end up being the most downloaded game on the PlayStation Network in 2007, but critical reception was mixed. Praise was given for the game's audio and visuals, but many felt limited by the activities presented with a small amount of gameplay. Some felt like it was a tech demo and lacked a lasting gameplay experience, while most saw it as an art piece rather than a game due to its simplicity, but this critique would transpire throughout the next games released by Thatgamecompany. After the release of Flow, Thatgamecompany shifted gears onto their next game, Flower. Developed as a spiritual successor to Flow, Flower was the first game for Thatgamecompany to be developed without a safety net of academia. Like Flow, players once again utilize the 6-axis controller to move a flower petal, and can use any of the controller's buttons for the wind to essentially accelerate this petal around. Flower doesn't have a true story, so to speak, but follows the various dreams of potted flowers on an apartment windowsill, with each level getting closer and closer to a distant city. Levels are divided up into various sections. Completing one unlocks the next, and each level has the player bringing life, color, and various changes into each open world. Moving the flower petal into other flowers makes them bloom and add to a multicolored petal trail behind them. Some flowers aren't needed to progress, but the longer the flower trail, the faster the petals move. Certain levels include threats of electricity that can burn flower petals and destroy part of your trail, but like Flow, there is no game over. The theme of nature was decided upon early in the development process. Thatgamecompany wanted Flower to provoke positive emotions for the player. Chen would describe the game as an interactive poem exploring the tension between urban and nature. Early concepts of the game focus on growing flowers based on the human consciousness, but decided to focus on petals floating in the wind with the intention to keep the player in a peaceful emotional state. Traditional mechanics were removed, like petal collection requirements to unlock levels and deeper gameplay elements to keep the relaxation. The development of the game lasted 2 years, but 3/4 were spent on prototyping. Flower ended up being produced in only 6 months. Just like Flow, the game wouldn't appeal to everyone, but critical praise was positive on the experience, which surprised the developers as they expected mixed reception. Critics applaud the freedom of movement, the visuals, and the music for a compelling emotional experience, but at a $10 price tag for about an hour of playtime displeased certain critics. The game would go on to receive an award from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences for Casual Game of the Year, and was named Best Independent Game of 2009 by the Spike Video Game Awards. After 2 successful games that built upon one another, Thatgamecompany's next game would be a culmination of everything learned and would be the biggest, most successful game for the company at the time. And now we arrive to Journey, the third and final game in the PlayStation Trilogy, which is arguably the most popular and talked about game with good reason. Much like Flow and Flower, the concept is simple and easy to understand, with easy to pick up controls for even the most casual gamer. But this time, there's absolutely no 6-axis implementation. The game presents a simple goal: reach the summit in the distance. Players take the role of a robed figure, known as the Traveler, who will have to traverse various ruins to complete their goal of reaching said summit. Like Flow and Flower, the story is told through visuals only, but has a bit more depth than the previous two. At the end of each level, the Traveler will meditate and visions will hint at what to expect as the journey continues. Along the way, players are able to run into other Travelers online, and players have the option of teaming up or continuing on without them. Teaming up won't hinder progress, and players can separate at any time, but teaming up will have helpful benefits. Players can work together to solve puzzles, and when standing close to one another, charge up each other's scarves, which helps the player fly, even going higher and longer by collecting symbols throughout the levels. Collecting all symbols unlocks the ultimate white-robed traveler with endless scarf power. Unlike most online games displaying the player's username and allowing communication through a mic, Journey only features the ability to speak by patterns of song that range from quick to long notes depending on how long the button is pressed. This signals to the other players various messages that are up for interpretation. It's almost like working together with a language barrier. And you only discover the usernames of fellow travelers you come across at the end of the game. It's a beautiful moment of discovering who you've known all this time. There's this excitement when you come across another traveler throughout the game. So when you somehow lose track of each other, a wave of loneliness and sadness emerge, almost like losing a loved one. After all, the game does an excellent job of creating this environment of beautiful isolation, making you believe that you're the only one of your kind. Environments are presented with such grandeur. Unlike open worlds that go on and on, Journeys is self-contained per level, but expresses a desire for exploration and feels just the right size for satisfaction. Exploring through ruins of a previous civilization adds a magical wonder, and soon the traveler is fraught with obstacles such as weather and ancient roaming weapons that will attack the player and remove a portion of their scarf. Each level presents its own beauty, with the glistening sand you'll trek across as a picture-perfect moment. Think about it. Uncharted 3: Drake's Deception was released less than a year before Journey, and one of its advertised features was its innovation in sand mechanics, how the sand drifts across the dunes, and how Nathan Drake interacts with it. Journey most likely had a fraction of Uncharted 3's budget, and honestly, has sand effects that could rival it. It's simply incredible. With success in Journey's future, development was extremely rocky. Journey was, after all, the biggest game that game company had created at the time. Development would begin in 2009 after Flower was released. Sony expected the game to be completed within a year, but development lasted more than 3 with multiple extensions needed. Difficulties with the developers' ideas while maintaining efficient communication led to stress and arguments. Avoiding burnout was decided upon, but this risked bankruptcy, which the company faced within the final months of development, with multiple developers actually going unpaid. But that game company's rock bottom would turn into critical praise in 2012. The game became the fastest selling game to date on the PlayStation 3 store in North America and Europe. It won over 100 awards and also had the honor of being the first video game soundtrack nominated for Best Score Soundtrack for Visual Media at the 2013 Grammy Awards, despite not winning. Journey's emotional roller coaster would round out that game company's exclusive contract with Sony and complete their PlayStation Trilogy. A compilation celebrating all 3 titles with new content would be released on a physical disc for the PlayStation 3 later in 2012 called Journey Collector's Edition. Further success would prompt multiple re-releases of these award-winning gems, including Flow on the PSP, and Flow later joined Flower on the PlayStation Vita. Flow, Flower, and Journey all appeared on the PlayStation 4, and Flower and Journey were surprisingly released on iOS and PC. Each game is easily accessible today, and there simply is no excuse to not see why these games were masterpieces on the PlayStation 3. After completing their contractual obligation of 3 games for Sony, that game company would choose to self-publish their long-awaited next game, Sky Children of Light, a spiritual successor follow-up to Journey that expands upon the concepts of that game into an open world with a heavier focus on online social mechanics for mobile devices and the Nintendo Switch. Like the trilogy of games before it, that game company continues to build upon its past and, once again, enlighten players with new, unique, and emotional experiences. Looking back at the trilogy of games, it's almost reminiscent of the trilogy of Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian. None of them are sequels to each other, yet they're connected, and it's easy to see how one game influenced the other and built on the mechanics, the style, and the gameplay. Many games have tried to replicate the success of that game company, and few have been successful. Despite being released 10 years ago, Journey still continues to make its rounds with various forms of merchandise released since, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, Sony's Play at Home initiative to promote social distancing included a free download of Journey for the PlayStation 4 from April 15th to May 5th in 2020. The act itself showed that if we can't be together physically, we can always find each other in some form. So let me know in the comments which is your favorite of the trilogy, Flow, Flower, or Journey. Please like and subscribe for future content. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.